folks, today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why you want to have a no-till garden. Now, traditionally, tilling a garden has been very valuable, especially when you're looking at gigantic farm type gardens where you're only one person or two people and you need to produce a lot of growing space. And so using machinery and tilling in between the rows and everything is kind of preferable. Now, the trouble with the tilling year after year after year is that in the first year you might see more fertility, but over time that fertility is going to decrease. What happens when we till the soil is that we introduce a lot of oxygen into the soil, so the microbes get really excited, and then those microbes are going to start overproducing. And when they overproduce, that creates a lot of fertilizer for our plants. So in that first year, our plants are going to be supercharged and produce very, very well. But what happens when we've supercharged all these microbes is that we've shortened their lifespan. They essentially get supercharged and then they die off. And so if we keep on tilling year after year after year, what's happening is we're killing more and more and more of those microbes that our plants need to be able to survive. In a healthy way anyways. So we don't want to be tilling because it kills off those microbes. When those microbes die, our soil tends to get less and less air spaces within the soil, so it starts to compact, it starts to get really, really hard, and so we have to keep on adding more and more and more organic material into our soil. Now, if we convert to a no-till garden, essentially what we're doing is putting a whole bunch of mulch and material on the surface of the soil. We're never ever walking on the soil, so we're not going to be compacting it. We're not going to be squishing the little organisms in the soil and killing them. We're also not supercharging them. We're just letting them behave the way that they would normally behave in a in a forest situation or any other natural ecosystem. And what they're going to do instead is those little organisms are going to start tunneling up and grabbing some of the mulch and decomposing it and heading back down, and they're going to be creating a bunch of pockets within our soil that's going to allow for the water and the nutrients and air and everything to be moving around. Also, when we don't till our soil, we're going to have a lot of things left over in our soil, like the roots from our plants the previous year and things like that. And when those types of plant materials start to break down over time, they become almost like if you were to add peat moss into your garden or something like that. We've got this rich organic material within the soil, and it is going to help to create even more fluffy soil and air pockets, because when that organic material becomes wet, it will expand, and then when it dries, it contracts, and then when it gets wet, it expands and it contracts, creating more and more space within our soil for the nutrients to travel through. Also, when we till our soil, because we are eliminating the amount of organic material in it and the amount of organisms in it, it's going to turn into like a fine powdery dust that's going to erode quicker, it's going to blow away easier, and we typically don't have any sort of nice protecting mulch layer on top of that soil that's keeping the moisture in, that's keeping that soil from blowing away. And so it's gonna basically just hold everything in place a lot better and eliminate a lot of that soil loss for us. I also want to mention the weed factor when we're talking about a no-till garden. When we till the soil, what tends to happen is that we can bring a bunch of the seeds from weeds and previous plants to the surface that would have otherwise remained dormant. And when those weed seeds get brought up to the surface, they suddenly have all of the sunlight and moisture that they need to germinate, creating more and more weeds in our garden. Whereas with a no-till garden, once we take care of those surface weeds, they don't have a tendency to come back, and we don't have a tendency to get a lot more new weeds. Within only about, the first year, 2 years, depending on how you set up your system, you're going to start to notice a huge influx in the amount of earthworms and other life that's in your soil when you're practicing no-till. And that's really exciting. I know the first spring after a year of doing no-till in my own backyard, I pushed some of the mulch away from the edge, and there were just handfuls and handfuls of earthworms in the soil, which was extremely exciting. For those of you that don't know, soil actually used to be valued by how many earthworms there were in a given amount of soil. And of course, now we don't value the soil quite the same way, but it's very exciting when you start to see all that life starting to form in your soil as well. Not to mention, you don't have to lug around a heavy rototiller or anything like that either.